My name is Nadine, and I am the Special Collections Librarian. And today I'd like to guide you through one of the collections that are available on our digital archive from our website. But before I get into that, I just want to give a little bit of background about how we came about to scanning these materials. So in 2016, the Carnegie Corporation of New York provided us with a grant for scanning historic materials from our archives and then providing educational outreach to students throughout Newark. However, the scope was limited for this project, so we were only able to scan materials that dealt with the Great Migration and the Latino migration into Newark. So from Special Collections, the only items that were sort of pertinent to that were some of the panoramas and bird's eye views of Newark. So you can imagine we have an entire collection of works on paper, and of course shopping bags and rare books and greeting cards, and much of that would not fit into this scope at all. So I'm very thankful for an intern, Emma Christ, who worked with me one summer, and because of her efforts, she very meticulously digitized some of the collections and provided descriptions of the objects. So the collection that I will be speaking about today was one of the ones that she worked on. And her endeavor has allowed anybody with an internet connection around the world to view these objects and to learn about them. And I'd also like to extend thanks to Ed Miller. While we did not cross paths, I was working in the reference department and he was working in the special collections department. He researched many of the objects and provided wonderful descriptions of them, which I later found on a hard drive. Just so you know, this program is being recorded and will be broadcast at a later time on both YouTube and Facebook. You can ask questions at any time in the chat box, or at the very end, you can raise your hand or I'll unmute you and you can ask that way. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can email me at any time at specialcollections@npl.org. If you've tuned into any of my other presentations, many of those were pre-recorded because all of us are working remotely while the library is closed. So it's very difficult to present on works that I can't physically access. So if I was in the library, I would be pulling out materials and displaying them, which I really can't do. I have a hard drive with some limited images, so I'll give you an example. So from our poster collection, maybe I have 10 random photographs of images. If I tried to put a presentation together on that, just from 10 images from a collection of thousands of posters, I just would not be able to communicate and explain the depth and scope of the collections. So fortunately for this collection, these manuscripts, they've been scanned and I can show you quite a few of those. As you may already know, the Special Collections Department traces back to our second director, John Cottondana, who began acquiring Japanese prints and other items for himself from around the turn of the 20th century. Holdings grew and then rare books were added, and many of those were donated by the trustees or by Newarkers who collected books and then gave them to the library. So to explain, our rare book collection is comprised of, firstly, the more general rare book collection. Many of these items trace back to books that were purchased by the Newark Library Association in the 19th century, and many others were gifts, and some were purchased for the library. And within the rare book collection, we have smaller groupings, including autographed books, many works by Leroy Jones, Miri Baraka, the Wilbur Macy Stone Collection, which includes hundreds of children's books and primers from the 19th and early 20th centuries, and some are even earlier than that. And also the McEwen Collection of holiday books. books. And a big shout out to our wonderful volunteers, Sophie and Elise, who've been working with much dedication every single week on conducting an inventory of some of those. And another major grouping is the Jenkinson Collection, which is named after trustee Richard Jenkinson, who either donated the books or provided funds for their purchase. So both Dana and Jenkinson were very interested in fine printing. And so many of the books are examples of works that were printed by fine presses. And we also have a very substantial Bruce Rogers collection. The earliest items in the Jenkinson collection date to the 15th century, and many of them predate the Gutenberg press. We also have several Qurans, and I will show you one of those. I will try to share my screen right now. Bear with me. So to access the collection, if you want to go from our website, it is just going to be npl.org. In the upper tab here, there's one called Collections and Services. You're going to click on Collections and then Digital Collections right here. And then the second option, which is My Newark Story and the Digital Archive. So when that page loads, it's this first paragraph right here, the Digital Archive, and you can click on that and it'll take you right to our repository. And I should also mention that we are in the process of migrating the repository. So this is the old version of it. And the link that I gave you right on the side was, I'm typing that out right now. This is the new archive that's being worked on, and when you're on this site, you can just click on NPL Collections. And when you do that, it'll show you the 3 special collections departments that we have in the library. So we have our local Newark History Room, the NJHRIC, which are Hispanic collections, and the collections that I'm talking about today will be found within the special collections link. I would also like to point out, it's very important when you're browsing, when you're looking at the address in your browser bar, for the protocol, you see how the URL starts with HTTPS. You need to make sure that S is there in the URL. Otherwise, if you're using just HTTP, some of the images might not show correctly, or sometimes they're missing altogether. So here are the 4 collections that we have digitized. So I will click on Islamic Manuscripts collection. And here is a description of all the, a broad description of the items, and all the items that have been scanned are below on 3 different pages that you can sort of just click through. So the first item I wanted to show is this Quran. We have several of them written by hand. This particular one dates to 1120 AD. And these items, they got a lot of use. So that's why it has a newer binding on it. So this particular leather binding that you see here on the screen, this dates to the 16th or the 17th century. Because this item is fragile and we don't have an overhead scanner, we used the camera and we took only a few shots of the book. So you could see one page here, you could see the beautiful calligraphy in the book. Within this view, you could click on the plus sign and then you can just zoom in closer to look at the beautiful writing. There's some gold embellishment here on the page as well. If you just scroll a little further down, you'll see additional images here on your left. You'll see the leather binding. And even though this page is beautiful, if you look at the very last one, there's so much more decoration on it, and you can imagine the amount of time someone spent, they were doing this by hand to add all these different colors along with the calligraphy on this page. And then if you scroll down, the records will have more information about some of these objects. So for the provenance here, this was a direct gift of Mr. J. Ackerman Coles. He was very well known in Newark. There is a statue of his father, Abraham Coles, right in Washington Park. And then you can see that the date here on the bottom is 11/20. Depending on the object and the accompanying information that came with it, some of these records will have more information than others. As you browse through the items in the archive, you'll notice that there's specimens in different languages. So you'll see manuscripts represented from India, Egypt, Persia, and not all of them are religious. This one, for example, is a Persian manuscript, and it's a work called the Gulistan, translated to mean the flower garden. And it's a well-known work of prose by a poet called Sadi, and it's often quoted as a source of wisdom. This particular one dates to 1825. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So if you click on the first image, which is here on your left, and again, this is an entire book. We also own a lot of loose leaves. That's why for some of the item records, you'll only see a front and a back to them. You could see the beautiful calligraphy in this work. You could see the flower decoration right here on top of this page. There's a second photograph that we took of the book. This one has a little less decoration, but still has the gold border around the pages. And then one more page here. And you can see just how every single page is. It's different, and many of these are very, very beautiful. The next one I would like to show you is a specimen of early Arabic papyrus. And that is this one. When Muslims conquered Egypt in the 7th century, papyrus continued to be used as the main writing material until writing on paper became more common in the 10th century. So as you can see, this piece survives, but not in a very good state. We do have other examples of Egyptian papyrus, which look a little better than this. This came from a very large box, which is kept in the Special Collections office, and it's a big, big red box, and on the side, it's written the history of writing. This is basically an exhibit in a box. So in 1930, John Cotton Dana wanted to put together an exhibit for Newarkers, and it was called The Origin of Writing. And as you know, we had exhibits in the library, and John Cotton Dana loved to show different objects in order to educate Newarkers. So he asked when he was planning this exhibit, he asked his trustees, as they were traveling the world, to pick up items that he could use to show. So, believe it or not, they came back with many interesting things that the Newark Library owns. For example, papyrus, scarabs, Coptic lead tablets, Sumerian cuneiform, and even more. Sometimes there's uncertainty about their authenticity, particularly the scarabs. If you read over the descriptions, sometimes you can learn about the origins of the writing, where it's from, and where the paper was manufactured. For the last part of the presentation, I'd like to talk about a portfolio that was created in 1928 by the Foliophiles Corporation. The official title was the Oriental Collection, so that is why I use that in the title for this presentation. We may think that because it's called the Oriental Collection that these are all examples from China, but you'd be surprised to learn that from the set of 39 examples, they're organized into 24 folders. There's also a scroll leaf. Only 3 are from China. Most are from the Middle East, India, Tibet, Mongolia, Burma, Siam, Java, Japan, and Turkey. 45 of these portfolios were produced, and the library owns number 29. And this was purchased by the library specifically for the Jenkinson Collection in 1929. They were compiled in an attempt to show the development of languages. The earliest item dates to the 8th century. The description of the portfolio indicates was purchased. And this is the description that's in the beginning of the portfolio. And the way that it's written, it's very amusing. So the Syriac manuscript was purchased from an eloquent Armenian who tried to hasten the sale by swearing, with a brave disregard of the anachronism that it was 18th century Coptic. The Syriac printed Bible and the Armenian printed ritual came from the library of a professor of Columbia University. The Armenian manuscript, the Algerian Quran, and the illuminated Sanskrit manuscript turned up in bookshops in New York and England. And the Egyptian Quran and the Persian manuscript containing the lives of the Sufis were acquired by a discerning agent in Cairo and in Constantinople. In order to create these portfolios of loose leaves, the manuscripts were taken apart. The purpose was to educate and to inspire future generations about these works. This was a very shocking thing to do, to take books apart and to destroy them in such a way. This was called biblioclasty, breaking apart the books, and has been seen nearly as a crime for centuries, even though the creators had benevolent intentions. There is a chart. It's basically a table of contents of all the different manuscripts that are in the collection. So the first one is a book of prayers in Syriac. This was the Nestorian manuscript. That was the first one that I spoke about from the list. So I spoke about the dots on top of the text. So those are the points that are used for vocalization. And then also the diamond right here, that serves as the break instead of paragraphs, which weren't used. And this one was from the 16th century. This is the Persian Manuscript.
Yes.
Okay, this is that very, very long poem. So there's 4 pages digitized here. Let me go back to. This is the poem that talks about the history of the Iranian people, and it's the longest poem that's known. And these are just, I'm just gonna point out the decoration. So again, you could see the handwriting, you could see even the decorations in the columns, and then this beautiful color right up here. This is the Mongolian manuscript, where the text is written into columns and then is read from left to right. And here is the Buddhist Ola. So you can imagine how small it is. I believe it's about less than 1 inch high. And these are the holes. And I was trying to show that a cord would have gone through the holes and a wood cover would have been placed on top. So this is an example of an entire book. But of course, since they tore the books apart, this is just a single leaf on a palm leaf there. And this was the Chinese miniature that I was showing. So now you could see this, the color and the detail that have been painted, showing a ceremony on a very, very small leaf from the Bodhi tree or the fig tree. I encourage you to explore and have a wonderful day, and I hope you stay tuned for some of our upcoming sessions. Thank you.